Welcome back to the Friday show presented by Woodbine Racetrack, where this Saturday they'll be part of NYRA's Cross Country Pick 5. The last three races at Woodbine, 8, 9, and 10, will be part of the Cross Country Pick 5, which is part of the Big Traverse Day card from Saratoga. I'm Ray Paulick here with Natalie Voss, editor-in-chief of the Paulick Report. And Natalie, you had a chance recently to speak to the incoming president of Keeneland, Shannon Bishop Arvin. Normally, we don't talk that much about incoming presidents of racetracks, but there's something a little bit different about Shannon, and that is the fact that she's a woman. Is that a big deal to you?
It is to me. I can't immediately think of too many other women who have served in similar capacities at other racetracks. Certainly, she's the first at Keeneland. And I asked her about that, and I was I was curious to know what she said. And of course, you can read the Q&A in the Ray's Paddock section on the Paulick Report. But I was wondering if she was going to sort of come at it from the perspective of, well, I've never really experienced any adversity because of my gender, so I don't really think about it. Obviously, she has family in the business. It might have been possible she may not have felt about that the way that other people feel about her being the first female president. But she did sort of acknowledge, this is a big deal, and I'm really excited to be the first one, which I thought was great.
Yeah. The quote that I think you're referring to, she said, "It's not lost on me, and I hope it does let women know that if you just get up every day and keep after it and be persistent, anything is possible." Now, you said that she has family in the business. Her father was attorney for Keeneland. Her grandfather was general manager for Keeneland. So she's not an outsider by any means. But I'd like to say this about it. There are some other legacy people that have associations with Keeneland that could have been handpicked for this job, could have been groomed for this job. But she's an overachiever. And I've talked to a lot of people in the business that have been on committees with her, that have sat across the table from her as an ally or as somebody negotiating, and I couldn't find anybody to say a bad word about her. And in this business, that's pretty rare.
It absolutely is, and I did sort of see that there were some readers and social media users reacting with concern about, well, yeah, sure, she's the first woman, but how big a deal is that if she has sort of this legacy situation coming in? But frankly, we have such a difficult situation with representation in the sport, whether it's gender or race or people who come in as outsiders. Let's just be glad this is a step. We have to start somewhere, and this seems like a great step.
Yeah, I agree. You asked her about diversity, and she said that's something that we're going to work on. I think it's important to recognize the lack of diversity, not just at Keeneland, but throughout the industry, including at many publications, and so that's important. She also talked a little bit about safety, and I think Keeneland has been at the forefront of a lot of initiatives. I think if you ask most people, they would think Keeneland is a nonprofit, which is not true. They're actually a for-profit. But I think going back to Nick Nicholson, he used to say we're a for-profit with a nonprofit philosophy. And she referenced that the one thing about Keeneland is that their philosophy really hasn't changed in 80 years, and safety is a big part of it.
Right. She touched off on it's sort of a difficult line to find between maintaining the traditions of the sport. Keeneland's always thought of as a very, very traditional place, possibly, in my mind at least, it's one of the more traditional racetracks in racing, and it prides itself on that. But being willing to change and embrace new attitudes about animal welfare that may sort of ripple out to regulation or rule changes to try to keep horses as safe as possible. So I think that's probably going to be a challenge for whoever's in that position going forward.
Yeah, Keeneland was one of the first tracks. Well, maybe the first track to install synthetic surfaces. They did take it out after a number of years, and they're back to dirt, which personally I think is a mistake. But they're still putting an emphasis on safety. I'm not sure I agree with how they went about it, but we'll see. Let's move on and talk about wagering. Equibase puts out statistics each month on wagering, and anybody that bet on the card at Saratoga last weekend, the Whitney, helped fuel a $35 million handle for the day, which was a record, more than $4 million higher than last year, which is kind of amazing when you think that there's nobody on track. All betting is done off track. And in fact, for the month of July, wagering was well up from 2019. Year to date, it's down, but there's a reason for that. And that's because something like 33% fewer races have been run this year. Wagering per race, if you look at the Equibase figures, is way up. And here's the troubling part. Wagering up per race, but purses have remained the same, and purses as a percentage of dollars wagered on a race are actually down a little bit. And that's kind of a troubling trend. I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I do think that it sort of is highlighting what has been apparently a problem for a long time, and I didn't know about it until there were racing cancellations. But the differences, as we've mentioned here before, also the differences in the amount of a wagering dollar that gets sent to purse accounts in each state, depending on how that dollar is wagered. It's not the same across all platforms and all situations as to whether the person's on track or off track. And some states have better, and horsemen's groups have better arrangements than others. And that could really make a big difference going forward beyond this year. I think everyone's sort of looking at those numbers going, well, that could have been worse considering 2020, but I'm more concerned about 2021 at this point, when the possible lack of incoming funds from that on-track wagering that would have been happening really catches up to some of these tracks and horsemen's groups.
Yeah, I think two things have happened this year with the pandemic. One is that all wagers, they used to be 80-20, 80% off track, maybe 20% on track, or even a little bit less. It's now 100% off track, and it's almost 100% ADW. Although there are some tracks are reopening, and there's small amounts of wagers on track. So as the shift goes from on track to ADWs, less money goes into purses per each wager dollar. The other thing that's happened, and this is probably good, is that the casinos had to close, and revenue from slot machines and casinos, which used to fund purses to a large extent in many states, have been cut off. And it exposes the tracks that have not been focusing on trying to drive more pari-mutuel wagering to their product. And it's important for them to understand that long term, they may not have those subsidies from the slot machines at the casinos. And it's important for them to focus on getting people to bet on their product. It's plain and simple.
Right. And I think that it also sort of would prompt, if I were a horseman, I would suddenly be very curious what exactly the terms were of the contract in my state, particularly if I was at a track that was partially supported by a casino. But sort of regardless of where you are, I would start getting really active about this issue, because, like, as you said, it's just going to continue to evolve.
Yeah, I think ADW, just like off-track betting, when it started, it just evolved, and now ADW wagering has just sort of evolved. And for the game to continue, we don't want to end up like the United Kingdom, where purses are so small, and the bookmakers really control everything. There's got to be balance. There's got to be balance between the racetracks, between the horsemen, and the ADWs.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, listen, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Friday Show. Thanks, Natalie, for joining me, and we will be back next week.